Hello, this is Dr. Jeff from Ed Family, where we strive to support our students to find out what they're good at so that they can do good with it. And today I'm here with a special guest, Rachel Jordan with TeachFX. First of all, Rachel, I just want to say congratulations on your new position at TeachFX. Could you go ahead and begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at TeachFX?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. So I have been with TeachFX for just a few months. I'm so excited to be here. I come here with about 20 years of marketing experience in a whole bunch of very mission-driven roles, including some ed tech brands. So at TeachFX, I am the first head of marketing. I'm here to really help tell the story to the entire K-12 community and help both teachers, school leaders, and districts understand how they can work with TeachFX.
Let's tell this story. Why TeachFX? For someone who doesn't know about TeachFX, why TeachFX?
Absolutely. So I can't say enough about how blown away I am by what TeachFX has already done and the amazing stories that I hear from teachers who are using TeachFX in the classroom. You know, at our kind of most basic level, what we do is use AI voice recognition technology to help teachers measure student talk in the classroom. But much more than that, we're actually surfacing for teachers the practices that work in the classroom to help get kids talking more. Because we all know, right, the decades of research that shows that students need to talk to learn. All students need to talk to learn. And when we change which students are getting to do the talking, we change who's doing the learning. So this software is not just about, quantifying student talk time, which is important because teachers often use the software and say, wow, I had no idea that my kids were only talking, 10% of the classroom. And now what am I going to do to figure out how to increase that talk time? But it's also about, elevating what is meaningful dialogue in the classroom? What are the dialogue patterns that are happening? What are the teaching practices that you're using that are working, whether it's wait time or questioning or building on student contributions? It's truly putting in teachers' hands the power to transform their teaching practice to more deeply engage kids in their learning.
Well, I have heard the phrase, those who are doing the thinking are doing the learning. And what I'm kind of hearing from you, Rachel, is those who are doing the talking are doing the learning. So how can we increase that student talk time and just bringing awareness to us as educators? Like, are we providing our students multiple opportunities for that student talk? And what are you kind of seeing as you kind of look at some of the promising practices, strong practices? What are some of those?
So I think, first of all, using something like TeachFX is a huge transformative practice because it's objective on-demand feedback. So it's completely different than being observed in a classroom, right, where the feedback is rare, if at all, and not necessarily objective. And we've seen that even when teachers who have instructional coaches use TeachFX, it's still so valuable to have that objective data where you're both kind of sitting on the same side of the table together, looking at this data together and saying, what can change in my classroom to help these kids talk more? And then beyond that, I think what's so interesting is how different kinds of teachers talk about student dialogue differently. Whether we're talking with math teachers or science teachers or ELA teachers, there's always a way to think about student dialogue. They definitely each process it and think about the teaching practices that work well for their kids differently.
I know sometimes when I'm in the classroom and I'm just in the moment, it's very hard for me to sometimes think about what is it that I'm doing, my own practices. But later when I have some time to kind of pause and reflect upon my teaching practices, I find that sometimes reflecting back and having something to reflect back on is so helpful. What are some things that TeachFX does to help teachers to kind of reflect upon their practice after they've already taught the lesson?
So the first thing is the objective data. So when you TeachFX a lesson, you get this recording that TeachFX will process for you that first shows you a word cloud that makes very clear what language you were using as the teacher versus what language your students were using. And this is always such an eye-opener, right? Because no matter what you're teaching, you want to see that your students are actually absorbing and using the right material, right? That they're using that academic vocabulary. And then we move on to show you things like what, overall kind of what's your student talk ratio versus teacher talk ratio. What percentage of the classroom time did students actually spend talking versus group time and silence time? We show all of that. So it's really just at a high level, here's what happened in your lesson. And then we start to visualize key parts of it. So you can actually see, here are my longest stretches of talk time as a teacher. And you can ask yourself, did this meet my instructional goals? Did I need to talk for this long, or could I have passed the ball back to the kids at a certain point here? And then we show longer stretches of student talk time, and we show various ways that you're actually working to get kids talking more. So open-ended questioning, or wait time 1, wait time 2. And when you can visualize these things, you can reflect on it in a way that you just can't do in the moment, because you're managing 5,000 things at once when you're a teacher with, 26, 30 kids in front of you. So to be able to look back at this stuff and see it so clearly and click in and listen to what you were saying, or listen to what the kids were saying and see a transcript if you prefer not to listen to yourself, then you really can reflect on this in a very different way than if you're just kind of going at the end of the day, what happened today and what do I want to do differently tomorrow?
So I'm seeing like 3 big pops. Like one is like a big picture pop, academic words. The second is like, hey, what are the percentages? Like how much opportunity did I give my students to talk? And I've heard that, a good goal to have for a teacher is 30% student talk time at least, right? So trying to, not that we have to reach that goal every time, but really striving to have that 30% student talk time, and TeachFX lets you know that. And then lastly, those reflective questions like you mentioned. So as you look at various components, those questions that cause the teacher to think about their own practice, very insightful. I did want to talk about one particular strategy, the ping pong versus the volleyball conversation. Can you share what is that? What is it, that ping pong versus volleyball conversations, and why would we want more of volleyball conversations?
So I have to say that as not an educator myself, I'm learning all of these terms as I learn how teachers use TeachFX. So I think that's important for me to say that I'm so passionate about what we're doing, but I'm definitely not an education expert yet. So, but I think as we show teachers kind of dialogue patterns, we know that there are different ways that teachers can facilitate dialogue in the classroom, right? And you can feel like you're kind of like you have to have a certain pattern, right? Whether it's teacher, student, or teacher, student, or teacher, student, teacher, that kind of stuff. We want to elevate that for you and show that to you, because that's the difference between real, meaningful, equitable dialogue in the classroom versus just kind of that like back and forth, the ping pong versus the volleyball.
That's something I noticed about myself when I personally used TeachFX. If I could just share my personal experience, when I saw the data, I was like, the student says something, and then usually I would say something. The student would say something, and then usually I would say something, right? And I would think, man, I'm giving my students so much talk time, and I was, but I wasn't really giving that volleyball opportunity. But then when I told my students, look, guys, what I would love to see is more volleyball conversations, and how it works in volleyball is like the ball comes over, someone's gonna bump it, someone's gonna set it, and then someone's gonna spike it, right? And so, what I would love to see more of is our students building on each other's ideas. So it's not just us going back and forth, although that's really great. What I would love to see is you guys talking with one another and building ideas with one another. And that data in TeachFX helped me to kind of have an aha moment that I wanted to have more volleyball conversations in the class.
Yes, and so we're so excited that we've just added this volleyball feature to TeachFX. So I think we were already helping with that urge for the teacher to jump into the conversation by measuring wait time 1 and wait time 2. And so when you can actually see, did I actually pause after I said something and let the students, have a moment to take a breath and jump in? And did I actually pause after a student said something so that maybe another student could jump in, not just me? But now we also have this volleyball feature. So we're really elevating exactly that pattern that you just described, so that, teachers can be even more reflective and purposeful about that.
Rachel, I'm glad that you kind of incorporated the idea of also the wait time, because, when I was young, I would see some young people raising their hands, ready to talk, even before the question was finished by the teacher. And for me, I don't know if it was because I was a plurilingual student or what, but I was just really struggling with just forming my ideas before I would say it out, right? It'd be very hard for me to. So this idea of giving students the wait time and being in the habit of giving wait time so that all learners can have the opportunity to say something. What a great reminder that that works in conjunction with the volleyball conversations. I know you had a chance to talk recently with our district about student voice, identity, and purpose. And would you say in a classroom that if you want to have the deep conversations like about purpose and identity, that you also need to have a lot of low stakes conversations where conversation is happening in the class very frequently?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to create that safe space and build that trust and connection both between you and the students and across between the students themselves, right? Before that deeper or maybe, more risky dialogue can actually happen between students. And I think, of course, being very quantified with our student talk time is part of that, right? Because we need to know that we're being purposeful about creating just the classroom rhythm and classroom culture that is putting student talk at the center.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's just a constant reminder that if you want to go deeper with the conversations, we have to also reflect upon our practices. And TeachFX is just a tool to do that. I just really love the folks over at TeachFX. All the people, please give my regards over to David Brazier and the entire team. You guys are like the kindest, most fun and interesting people, I gotta say.
Oh my gosh, I have to say, I feel like I won the lottery being part of this team. Every person on this team is so amazing. And of course, most of the people on the team are educators themselves, people like David who are, leaders in the space, as well as so many who have been in the classroom and really understand inside out what we're doing. So it's a lovely team. And of course, we can't say enough about what's happening in Anaheim. We're so passionate about it. It's really an incredible example, incredible story.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us on Ed Family. I know we appreciate so much TeachFX, and also if for those of you who valued today and having an opportunity to think about student talk, raising student voices, or other topics like project-based learning and the 5 C's, civic engagement and learning, please be sure to like and subscribe. This is Dr. Jeff from Ed Family with Rachel from TeachFX signing out.